Namaskar. Sri Aurobindo's Coming to Pondicherry. A review from legal and spiritual angles. Long many years back, more than 115 years I think, on May 19, 1908, Sir Andrew Fraser, the Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, wrote to Lord Minto, the Viceroy. Here is the letter, I quote. "There is one matter which I desire to press very strongly. The necessity of deporting Aurobindo Ghosh. He is the ringleader, but he has kept himself like a careful and valued general out of the sight of the enemy. We cannot get evidence against him such as would secure his conviction in a court. But we have papers and information quite sufficient to convince the reasonable mind and justify deportation. I urge this on your Excellency's personal attention. See what the man has done. See the length to which he is prepared to go. See the skill with which he has used his human tools and kept himself in the background. It will be deplorable to set him free to recommence operations." Such an accusation against Sri Aurobindo reminds us of the anxiety faced by the rulers of ancient Athens about Socrates. Socrates was also imprisoned and later poisoned by hemlock for similar reasons. He was accused of corrupting the youth by teaching them to question the authority and traditional values. The ruling elite of Athens feared. Now just let's note all the points because we will see the same thing being accused about Sri Aurobindo. The ruling elite of Athens feared the rebellious attitude of the youth, who were developing a strong sense of national feeling. Thirdly, a desire to preserve their cultural values. And these revolutionary ideas were seen as a threat to the state's stability. The Athenian rulers soon realized the dangers of suppressing dissenting voices. And we see again, they condemned Socrates because they said, these people, Socrates, he does not recognize the state's gods. Not only that, Socrates introduced his own concept of a single universal deity. And again, Athens was still reeling from the effects of Peloponnesian War. And therefore we see impiety and corrupting influence on the students, on the youngsters, was the main charge. So you see the similar things that we in life of Sri Aurobindo also, what he was accused of, or very close to what Socrates was accused about. I'll read out another letter written to Lord Morley on 14th April 1910. Remember the date, because by 10th April, by 4th April, Sri Aurobindo had already reached Pondicherry. So this letter was written after he arrived in Pondicherry. And here is the letter I read out. I have been somewhat exercised by the questions in the House of Commons about Aurobindo Ghosh. He is the most dangerous man we have to deal with at present, and he has great influence with the student class. See the similarities? Influence of the student class, influence about the youngsters. Again on 26th May of the same year, he wrote, "I can only repeat what I said to you. He is the most dangerous man we have now to reckon with, and has an unfortunate influence over the student class. And Indians who know him well have told me he is quite beyond redemption. Surely you cannot hope that such a man should remain at large. We have to consider two courses of procedures against him: deportation and prosecution in accordance with law. In the meanwhile, Aurobindo is in Pondicherry." So here are the two letters of the British Times, which I found very close to what they had done in Athens to Socrates. That's the legal side. But unfortunately, Socrates had to lose his life by drinking hemlock. But it did not happen that with Sri Aurobindo, because Sri Aurobindo had obeyed the divine command which asked him to go to Pondicherry, and he arrived in the town on 4th of April 1910, and it seems at around 4 p.m. His journey by ship SS Duplex from Calcutta to Pondicherry was shrouded in secrecy, unknown to the British government until later. Well, it was the beginning of a new dawn, not just for the town but for the whole world. Not only for himself but for all mankind. It was as if Sri Aurobindo had arrived in Pondicherry as a colonist from immortality, ultimately establishing the consciousness and power of the supramental force on this land. Now coming to the second part, Sri Aurobindo's coming to the sacred land of Puducherry was a fulfillment of a prophecy. K.V. Rangaswamy Iyengar, a Jamindar of Kodiyalam, had been searching for a yogi from the north because his Kulaguru, Naga Japata, had told him to seek refuge under a yogi who would come to Puducherry as a fugitive and would proclaim Purna Yoga. Sri Aurobindo's arrival at Pondicherry was a clear sign that this prophecy had come true, and K.V.R. Iyengar immediately recognized and accepted Sri Aurobindo. This town of Pondicherry is also known for its ancient connection with Rishi Agastya, who is believed to have visited the nearby Chunamba river. According to legend, Rishi Agastya performed a yajna on the river bank, which is now considered a sacred site. It is also said that he accomplished a remarkable feat by compressing the river Kaveri and holding its water in his Kamandala. It is also said by some scholars that Rishi Agastya's ashram was located in the same area as the present Sri Aurobindo ashram. Now we see a third influence what I call a spiritual influence. Interestingly, near the spiritual ecosystem of Pondicherry, Mahavatar Babaji is believed to have been born in Paranjipettai, Tamil Nadu, around 203 AD. This place is only about 60 kilometers from Pondicherry. In fact, many of us know that Babaji encourages people to embark on a journey of self-discovery, leading to a more harmonious and balanced life. His message of love, forgiveness has resonated the worldwide. Closer to our times, Sri Ramalinga Swamigal, 1823 to 1874, from Maradur, Chidambaram, Tamil Nadu, 69 kilometers from Pondicherry, is known for his ability to transform his physical body into an immortal one through deep meditation and divine grace. He taught that Arut Perum Jyoti, or the divine light, is the ultimate reality that illuminates all existence. He claimed to have transformed his own body into this divine light. So what I am trying to trace here is the spiritual echo zone of Pondicherry, which attracted great many yogis and munis from immemorial times. And about Ramalinga Swamigal, in fact, we have a very interesting conversation with the mother of Sri Aurobindo Ashram. Here is the letter that I will read out to you. A disciple of the mother told her, "Someone sent me a letter on the body's transformation. If you are interested." Mother said, "Let's see." The disciple, "It seems that a Tamil yogi, Swami Ramalingam, of this region, who lived around 1850, had experiences which he described in a poem and appear rather connected. Experiences of the transformation of the skeleton, bones, etc. Is a Tamilian who sent me this letter asking me to put the question to you." "All right," the mother said, "all right." And the disciple reads out the letter. "The mother may throw light on the nature and extent of the transformation the Swami had in the last part of his life. These are inquiries given by the disciple of Sri Aurobindo Ashram, who was also connected, who was pretty much influenced by Swami Ramalingam. So he sent out his letters to the mother, and these were read out by a disciple. So that's what I am reading here. So this question was asked by the disciple, that the mother may throw light on the nature and extent of the transformation of the Swami in the last part of his life. The Swami often declared affirming the transformation and deathlessness of his body by the power of what he calls Arut Perum Jyoti, the infinite or vast grace light of the divine. He also made the forecast and promise around the year 1870 that the Supreme Divine would soon come to the earth for establishing his direct rule of grace light, which the Swami also called as the truth light. When a new race of people would arise defying disease, aging and death. You can see the close connection between what Swami Ramalingam tells and what has been told by the mother and Sri Aurobindo about this new race of people, about the deathlessness of the human body, and about the transformation of the human body, All these are things that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have also talked about. So this disciple directly asked the mother, what does she think about it? Mother replied, it's interesting. And then mother asked, and how long did he live like this? The disciple, it seems it happened towards the end of his life, and I think it must have lasted for a few years. And Ramalingam Goswami said he would return. Mother, 1870? Yes, he was born in 1823 and died in 1874. Mother, he died 2 years after Sri Aurobindo's birth. Then the disciple continues to ask a question. Mother, one last thing. A question asked by the person who wrote the letter. He asks whether the vast grace light or truth light the Swami mentions is the supramental light. Now this is very relevant and important for those of us who have read Sri Aurobindo. Mother says, which light? The disciple, the vast grace light. Grace light? Oh, I like that very much in his letter. Grace light, that is what is working, The work being done through this mother's body is exactly like that. It's exactly like a grace light. I like that a lot. It's exactly that. And mother continues, you see, it's a light with several degrees. And in the most material, it must be the supramental force. Because it's slightly golden, slightly pinkish, that light, but very, very pale. One of them, gesture pointing to another higher level, is white like milk, opaque, is very strong. And there is another, which is like white, which is white like, is transparent light. With that one is strange. One drop of it on the hostile forces and they are dissolved. They melt like this, gesture before one's very eyes. I said all that to Sri Aurobindo. He completely confirmed it. That's essentially the grace in its supreme state. Mother says, that's essentially the grace in its gesture very high, supreme state. It's a light. It has no color, It's transparent. And that light, I've experienced that, I mention it because I know it. If you put it on a hostile being, it melts like that. It's extraordinary. And then in its benevolent form, as we might call it, that is to say, the grace helping and assisting and healing, is white like milk. And if I want a holy material action, but this is quite recent, it's since this new consciousness came, then in its action on the physical, it's become slightly colored. It is luminous, golden, with some pink in it, but it's not pink. This is a note that we have taken from the Mother's Agenda, Volume 11. So what I found was that it was into this spiritual zone in and around Pondicherry, with the legend of Agastya, Rishi Agastya, the Mahavir avatar, the Swami Ramalingam. Into this spiritual zone, in and around Pondicherry, the Sri Aurobindo arrived to continue the work and to fulfill spiritual efforts initiated by the great yogis of the past. That is why Kulaguru Nagai Japata had predicted that the yogi from the north would proclaim a Purna Yoga, implying perhaps that Purna Yoga or Integral Yoga would unify all the previous yogic traditions and systems in India. This is what we see the background, the spiritual background of the place of Pondicherry. And Sri Aurobindo had arrived, had come to this place. So it is not a kind of a premeditated thing. The divine command, which is later known as the Sri Krishna's own command, had told him to come to Pondicherry. The Adesh was given to him to arrive at Pondicherry. So Pondicherry, we can see, was already a kind of spiritually prepared place. I mean, through this great town, many yogis and sadhaks and nationalists or national movement heroes, they all resided here, come across this place, and the divine had brought another great person, Sri Aurobindo, to fulfill the destiny that was already prepared in Pondicherry. But what I want to say here is, there is a different sense in his coming. And that's what I'd like to see. Was his coming to Pondicherry a breakaway from the past? Or was it a kind of a continuum? Sri Aurobindo had started at one place, although he changed the places, but he did not change the plan, as I say. Well, here is what I have developed, the new thought. And I am reading out what Sri Aurobindo had given in the Uttarpara speech on May 30th, 1909. I'll read a passage. When I approached God at that time, I hardly had a living faith in Him. The agnostic was in me, the atheist was in me, the skeptic was in me, and I was not absolutely sure that there was a God at all. I did not feel His presence. So here was the starting, the beginning of this great spiritual yogi, Mahayogi, who writes that in the beginning he did not even feel that there is the idea of God was right. What he says, the agnostic, the atheist, the skeptic. So he was completely at the one spectrum of the belief on the Godhead or spirituality. And yet he frankly tells, yet something drew me to the truth of the Vedas, the truth of the Gita, the truth of the Hindu religion. So he was caught by this great ideal, the great spiritual thinking and mantras of the Vedas and the Gita. I felt there must be a mighty truth somewhere in this yoga, a mighty truth in the religion based on the Vedanta. So we see a beautiful connection, how Sri Aurobindo's attraction or aim towards a greater Godhead or a consciousness started with this yoga that was found in Vedanta, not necessarily in the name of a God or somebody. It is not a personalized deity, a personalized consciousness, but a kind of an impersonal consciousness, what you find in the mighty truth somewhere in the yoga, a mighty truth in the religion based on the Vedanta. So he says, so when I turned to the yoga and resolved to practice it and find out if my idea was right, I did it in this spirit and with this prayer to Him. If Thou art, then Thou knowest my heart. Thou knowest that I do not ask for mukti. I do not ask for anything which others ask for. I ask only for strength to uplift this nation. I ask only to be allowed to live and work for this people whom I love and to whom I pray that I may devote my life. So remember, Sri Aurobindo's life to spiritual life and the spiritual life began with this prayer of wanting to serve the people. And not only that, as I said, I ask only for the strength to uplift this nation. So that was the very first attraction to a spiritual life, because he wanted to gain that strength, that force, that Shakti, which can help him in solving, freeing this nation. So he says, I don't want any mukti. I want only Shakti to uplift this nation. And wonderfully he says, these people whom I love and to whom I pray that I may devote my entire life or my life. So this is the beginning of Sri Aurobindo's aspiration for serving the nation and for realizing that, as it says, I resolved to practice it and find out if my idea was right. The idea of the divinity, the idea of that there is a greater truth. So he even experimented, practiced it. So that is how we see, this is what Sri Aurobindo had prayed for even before coming to Pondicherry. I ask only for strength to uplift this nation. And the strength he received was not just from lofty idealism, which had indeed awakened the dormant Indians at that time. Lofty idealism about the Bharat, about Swaraj, about the Purna Swaraj, etc. And all that he really brought about was really awakened the dormant Indian public at that time. What he calls later on the tamas that was there, spread all over the country, he managed to awaken them, to break this tamas by his idealism. And the idealism, we will see, was not just Purna Swaraj for the sake of the country, but India's freedom was linked with the freedom of the humanity. So that was the wide ideal. But at the same time, I would say, it's not only the idealism, but this strength came from a deeper source. And it came as a result of his own yoga tapasya, his own identification with the Bharat Shakti, Bharat Mata. His vision of nationalism was a spiritual ideal, not just a political one like those that had driven many great countries to freedom movements in Europe. So this is what I want to say. There is not just an idealism which did its work, but he got the strength to awaken this tamasic country because of his own connection, identity with Bharat Mata, with Bharat Shakti. As he writes here, working for the country's political freedom was an urgent necessity, because without it, no further steps towards nation building and societal progress were possible. Sri Aurobindo in fact declared, we aim not at the alteration of a form of government, but at the building up of a nation. Of that task, politics is a part, but only a part. So let us remember that he had entered the political field because that was the very first part of the work he had planned for his own life. And now we can understand why he said that I'm first a politician and then a poet. He was first a politician because he had entered the field of politics only as a first step towards a greater emancipation of humanity. So I see, he writes in one place, what he writes is here, I am quoting there from Sri Aurobindo. Our aim will be to help in building up India for the sake of humanity. You see what a lofty ideal? Building up India for the sake of humanity. This is the spirit of the nationalism which we profess and follow. We say to humanity, the time has come when you must take the great step and rise out of a material existence into the higher, deeper and wider life towards which humanity moves. The problems which have troubled mankind can only be solved by conquering the kingdom within, not by harnessing the forces of nature to the service of comfort and luxury, but by mastering the forces of the intellect and the spirit, by vindicating the freedom of man within as well as without, and by conquering from within external nature. For that work, the resurgence of Asia is necessary, therefore Asia rises. For that work, the freedom of greatness of India is essential. Therefore, she claims her destined freedom and greatness, and it is to the interest of all humanity that she should wholly establish her claim. That she should wholly establish her claim. The freedom, unity and greatness of India have now become necessary to the world. So this was the aim. What I am trying to establish is, what I said here, it now becomes clear that both for India's freedom and for humanity's liberation from matter's shackles, a higher, deeper and wider life requires a greater force and consciousness, something beyond which has been available to humanity, which has not been available to humanity since its earliest awakening. Sri Aurobindo understood that for humanity to take its next evolutionary step, immense strength and energy were needed. Even in this deep involvement with India's freedom struggle, he was fully aware of the absolute necessity to assist humanity in its critical stage of evolution. His vision extended beyond the nation, a realization that came through his intense practice of yoga in his personal life. His profound spiritual experiences in Baroda, Kashmir, Chandanagar, Calcutta assured him that higher levels of consciousness could not only fulfill his dream of liberating India and Asia, but also uplift humanity as a whole. So we see here that all the spiritual experiences that he had before coming to Pondicherry, the experiences which all of us know, what he had the experience in Baroda about the Kali, and in Kashmir about the experience of the impersonal Brahman, Nirguna Brahman as we call, in the hill of Shankaracharya, then at Chandanagar also, and then of course the Calcutta thing in the Alipur jail, the Vasudeva, the universal form of Vasudeva. So all that assured him that there is a higher level of consciousness which, if brought down, can fulfill not only India's freedom but the freedom of humanity itself. So what we are understanding here is that it was this deep understanding and vision of the future of humanity that compelled Sri Aurobindo to withdraw from active politics at the height of his leadership in India's freedom movement and shift to Pondicherry. As he himself explained about his retirement to Pondicherry in 1910, Sri Aurobindo writes, "But this did not mean, as most people suppose, that he had retired into some height of spiritual experience devoid of any further interest in the world or in the fate of India. It could not mean that, for the very principle of his yoga was not only to realize the divine and attain to a complete spiritual consciousness, but also to take all life and all world activity into the scope of the spiritual consciousness and action, and to base life on the spirit and give it a spiritual meaning." So my reading is that if this is the gigantic, the master plan, in which everything had its own place. The first place was given to politics and the freedom of the country. That was necessary base. And then the second step was to find out the levels of the consciousness, different planes of consciousness, for which he had to come to Pondicherry and work and do the sadhana in a secluded place, as he calls it, the cave of tapasya. And then we did different levels of consciousness, which he discovered right till that of the supermind that was indicated by Swami Vivekananda in the Alipur jail. And then he brings down that force for the liberation of humanity. So I see one continuum of his plan. So that's why I call it that hence his retreat to the cave of Tapasya, Pondicherry in 1910 was not a change of plan, but a change of strategy. It was a continuation of his struggle for freedom, the freedom of the nation and then of humanity, but rooted in the freedom of the individual. That was very important. First of all, the work begins with the individual. In fact, he himself writes, I'll read out his quotation, his lines. "What was once visible through political actions and strategies had now become invisible and imperceptible." So we do not see a Sri Aurobindo going from lecture to lecture, from talk to talk, from one place to place. The external movements of political life were not there. But then, all this work was being done imperceptibly, invisibly, from behind the screen. So he says, he has not withdrawn from the world activity or the nation's freedom movement, but now he is working from behind. So the physical being that is working in the political arena has now been withdrawn, but his spiritual consciousness was all the time working for the freedom of the country as much as the freedom of the world, of humanity. In fact, as most of us know, the immense amount of work he did during the World War I and World War II, influencing the other forces, the winning forces, against these Asuric forces. So he was there always working, although imperceptibly now. Outer action transformed into inner force. The individual had gradually expanded into a universal personality. Aurobindo Ghosh had now become Sri Aurobindo. The same man who had written in 1909 that he was not sure that there was God at all would soon make a profound declaration. I read out the declaration. "Afterwards, when I came to Pondicherry, this unsteady condition came to an end. The Guru of the world, who is within us, then gave me the complete directions of my path, its complete theory, the 10 limbs of the body of this yoga. These 10 years he has been making me develop it in experience, and this is not yet finished." The Brahman, the Self, God are always there. What God wants in man is to embody himself here in the individual and in the community to realize God in life. So this is the realization, as he wrote again in elsewhere, that he was constantly living in the Brahman consciousness. So you see the vast change. The one who said, I do not believe in God, I do not know if he exists, now he says he is living constantly in Brahmic consciousness. But he says that this work begins with an individual. That's what he writes in another place. He says, if we cannot rise above, the quotation is, the spirit in humanity discovers, develops, builds its formations first in the individual man. That's what I was telling. The freedom, the liberation, the transformation takes place in the individual first. It is through the progressive and formative individual that it offers the discovery and the chance of a new self-creation to the mind of the race. For the communal mind holds things subconsciously at first, or if consciously, then in a confused, chaotic manner. It is only through the individual mind that the mass can arrive at a clear knowledge and creation of the thing it held in its subconscious self. So we see here, this is the importance of the individual. And this individual, as I perceive it and as many of us perceive it, if the individual is the key to all spiritual progress, then one must begin, one man must lead the evolution. And one man's perfection still can save the world, wrote Sri Aurobindo in Savitri. Sri Aurobindo himself is that one man, eternity's delegate, chosen to chart a new path for humanity towards the supramental consciousness. And this one man, what was his philosophy? What was his realization? We put it in a simple paragraph. I read out the paragraph. If we cannot rise above, that is to the supramental level, it is hardly possible to know the last secret of the world, and the problem it raises remains unsolved. The physical body, the life, the mind and understanding, the supermind and the Ananda, these are the spirit's 5 levels. The physical body, life, mind, supermind and Ananda. These are the spirit's 5 levels. The higher we rise on this ascent, the nearer to man comes the state of that highest perfection, open to his spiritual evolution. Rising to the Superman, it becomes easy to rise to the Ananda. One attains a firm foundation in the condition of the indivisible and infinite Ananda, not only in the timeless Parabrahman, but in the body, in life, in the world. The integral being, the integral consciousness, the integral Ananda blossoms out and takes form in life. This is the central clue of my yoga. This is the central clue of my yoga. its fundamental principle. So this is what Sri Aurobindo had realized, that how to reach, and without reaching the supermind, this transformation of the world is not possible. It's only when the integral being, the integral consciousness blossoms, the integral Ananda blossoms out in this world, that there will be the divine life, or what he calls the life divine, or how we are going to have. So this was the magnificent, as he puts it simply, this is the central clue of my yoga. How to go about it, he has written profusely in his later works, but this is what we see Sri Aurobindo, the individual, the one who did not believe in the divine, realizes the highest levels of the divine consciousness, not only reaches the highest levels, but then how to bring it down and to transform the world. So this is the significance of his coming to Pondicherry. That means how at one step, for example, when he was in Baroda, he realized when he was studying and going into the roots of Indian culture, he changed places. He came down to Calcutta. There again, when he started the Bande Mataram, started inspiring the youth for the freedom of the country. It was only a plan, a perfect plan, the general plan. He was falling from one place to another. Leaving Baroda does not mean that he left the work. It was a stage in his work, and the next stage required the stage change of place. There's only that kind of a change. So it's not that he abandoned the Sri Aurobindo was somebody else in Baroda and he became somebody else in Calcutta. It's one continuum. So also from Calcutta he came down to Pondicherry because he had a different level to work on. So this is where we see that this entire journey from the individual to the universal personality, that is Sri Aurobindo, unfolded in Pondicherry. It started off all with Baroda, came down to different places in Calcutta, Chandanagar, etc. And then the whole thing was, there was a consummation in Pondicherry. So let's not divide him from place to place. Places have changed, but the work, the supreme plan of his heightening and transformation of the earth remains the same. So what I conclude with is that at Pondicherry, a seer was born, a shining guest of time. This is how I prefer to see Sri Aurobindo's coming to Pondicherry. Of course, from the legally he was haunted, pursued, but as we know, right from the beginning, he was under the guidance of Sri Krishna. It is Sri Krishna's Adesh that had told him to go to Chandanagar or to Pondicherry. And in many other ways he was guided. So also we see his coming to Pondicherry was all in the master plan of the divine. The supreme divine, the master yogi, the master guide, Sri Krishna had taken him from place to place, fulfilling his one greater aspect. And ultimately, in Pondicherry, a seer was born, a shining guest of time. I hope I've been able to convey something of the significance of the coming of Sri Aurobindo to Pondicherry in 1910. Thank you very much.